Under this desert lies the strangest tomb in Egypt. 30 feet of sand and rock, and then a hallway. It runs for 350 meters through solid bedrock, longer than 3 football fields laid end to end. Cut into its walls are 24 rooms, and waiting inside each room, in darkness that has never once been broken by the sun, sits a box of polished black granite, heavier than anything you have ever stood next to. They are big enough to park a car inside. Their walls are half a meter thick. Their inner surfaces shine like dark mirrors, and their corners are so sharp that visitors keep asking the same question. Who was buried here? A pharaoh? A dynasty of kings? No, not a single king. Not one human being. And that is not even the strange part, because in one sealed chamber behind a wall of untouched plaster, Egypt left something behind, something every treasure hunter for 3,000 years walked right past, something no thief ever thought to steal. By the end of this story, you will stand in that room, and you will not see this place, or the people who built it, the same way again. This is the Serapeum of Saqqara. Stay with me, because the deeper we go, the stranger it gets. Go back 3,000 years to the city of Memphis on the west bank of the Nile. It is one of the largest cities on earth, and somewhere in its greatest temple lives the single most important animal in the world. A bull. Not a statue of a bull, a living, breathing, grass-chewing bull. The Egyptians called him Apis. They believed the god Ptah, the divine craftsman who dreamed the world into being, chose one bull at a time to live inside. Priests searched the entire country for a black calf with the right markings, a white diamond on the forehead, the silhouette of a falcon on the back. When they found him, that calf stopped being an animal. He became a god you could touch. Apis lived like no creature has ever lived. His own temple, his own harem of cows, festivals in his honor, oracles read from his movements, a staff of priests to feed and wash and worship him. And when he died, Egypt did not bury a bull. Egypt buried a god. The embalming alone took 70 days. The same ritual given to kings. Priests mummified the enormous body on massive alabaster tables that still exist in Memphis today, wrapped it in resin and fine linen, and fitted a gilded mask over the face. The whole country went into official mourning, and the search began immediately for the next calf, because the moment one Apis died, the god Ptah had already moved into a new body somewhere along the Nile. Egypt just had to find it. More than 60 of these bulls were buried at Saqqara over the centuries. 60 state funerals, 60 processions into the desert. 60 times the wealth of a superpower was spent on a grave for an animal. Then the priests carried him out into the desert plateau of Saqqara, already ancient even then, already crowded with pyramids 1,000 years old, and they took him underground. Here is the question that should stop you. How much do you have to believe in something to carve a mountain for it, from the inside, in the dark? Because that is exactly what happened next. For centuries, each sacred bull got his own separate tomb, dug one at a time, scattered and vulnerable. Grave robbers found most of them. The arrangement was failing, and the man who fixed it held a job that would not exist again for another 3,000 years. His name was Khemweset, fourth son of Ramses II. He could have spent his life as a general or a governor. Instead, he became something Egypt had no word for yet. Today, we would call him an archaeologist, the first one in recorded history. While his father built monuments to himself, Khemweset wandered Saqqara restoring monuments to other people, the Pyramid of Djoser, the Pyramid of Unas, the sun temples of kings dead for 1,000 years before he was born. He repaired their crumbling stone, and then he carved fresh inscriptions recording the name of each original owner. His reason survives in the stone, so that their names would never be forgotten. Sit with that. 3,000 years ago, a prince of Egypt was already looking backward at deep time, already afraid of forgetting. He had understood something we usually credit to modern historians. A civilization does not die when its buildings fall. It dies when its memory does. For the Apis bulls, Chemwisset ordered something new. A single underground gallery, one long corridor with burial chambers branching off it, so every future god bull could rest under one roof, guarded, hidden, permanent. His workers cut it straight into the bedrock of Saqqara. Each dead god now slid into a chamber off the central corridor, sealed behind masonry, guarded by the darkness itself. When the prince died, tradition says he chose to be buried there too, among his bulls. And Mariette would indeed find a coffin, a golden mask, and jewelry bearing Chemwisset's name deep in these tunnels. Though here is a detail scholars still argue about. That burial may not be the prince at all. It may be one of the bulls, dressed in his treasures and carrying his name. The first archaeologist in history may have given his own identity to the god he served. Even his grave is a riddle. His gallery worked so well that Egypt never stopped using it. Kings came and went. Dynasties collapsed. Persians invaded, then Greeks, and through it all, for over 1,000 years, the tunnels under Saqqara kept growing. But it is what later generations put inside those tunnels that no one has fully explained. Around 600 BC, the burials changed. Instead of wooden coffins, Egypt began commissioning sarcophagi of granite and diorite, some of the hardest stone on the planet, quarried at Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south. 24 of them still sit in the Great Gallery today. The numbers were recorded by the first man to measure them, and they have not changed. 3.85 meters long, 2.32 wide, 2.32 tall. The lid alone adds another meter. Together, box and lid weigh at least 62 tons. Some estimates push close to 100. Nobody can weigh them directly because nobody can move them. Now look closer, because the weight is not the mystery. The outside of many boxes is rough, almost unfinished, but the inside is a different world. The inner walls were ground and polished until black granite behaved like dark glass. Run a torch across it and the flame reflects back at you. The corners meet at edges sharp enough to catch a fingernail. One visiting engineer described laying a pencil into the junction where lid meets wall and watching it sit flush along the entire length, no gap, no wobble, no light leaking through. That contrast is the signature of the Serapeum. Rough shells, flawless hearts. Whoever made these cared about exactly one thing, the surface that would face the god. Everything human eyes might see could stay unfinished. The perfection was pointed inward. In the 1990s, an American engineer named Christopher Dunn brought precision instruments into the tunnels, the kind used to inspect aircraft parts. He laid a machinist's straight edge against an inner surface and reported flatness within 2/10,000ths of an inch. To this day, no laboratory has independently repeated his measurements, and Egyptologists dispute what they mean. So treat that number with care. But here is what nobody disputes. This is granite, a stone that laughs at copper tools. It was shaped with hand abrasion, patience, and geometry. And the final polishing was done after the boxes were already underground. Read that again. The mirror finish was created down there, in a sealed corridor, in absolute darkness, by torchlight or lamplight or reflected sunlight bounced from mirror to mirror, by craftsmen who would never see their finest work in full daylight. Not once. Perfection for an audience of no one. If stone like this keeps you up at night the way it keeps us, subscribe, because this channel exists to decode exactly these places, and you will want what comes next. because the builders of the Serapeum did something almost no ancient site ever does. They told us how long it took. Moving a 60-ton box is a modern engineering problem. Moving it down a sloping tunnel, around a corner, into a chamber cut below floor level, with no crane, no engine, and no room to stand more than a few men across, sounds impossible. It wasn't. And the solution is so simple it hurts. Sand. Not as an obstacle, as a machine. The workers flooded the corridor with sand until it rose level with the tunnel floor, then dragged the sarcophagus horizontally across the packed surface, sliding on wooden sledges, hauled by ropes and human muscle. When the box hung above its chamber, they began removing the sand from beneath it, basket by basket. Grain by grain, the floor itself lowered the box into place. Gravity did the lifting, in reverse. We are not guessing. An inscription from the reign of Ptolemy II, around 247 BC, records one burial like a project report. Preparing materials. 3 months and 15 days. Cutting and building the chamber. 6 months and 5 days. Hauling the sarcophagus into position. 28 working days. Finishing. 2 months and 9 days. 28 days to move one box. Somebody counted. Somebody wrote it down in stone, the way a site foreman signs off a job. Across 2,000 years, the Serapeum hands us its own timesheet. And the granite itself had already traveled further than most Egyptians ever would. Quarried at Aswan, floated north down the Nile on barges during the flood season, then dragged overland from the river to the plateau, wooden sledges over wetted sand, exactly as Egyptian tomb art shows. They had mastered every step, the quarries, the river, the sand, the dark. The system ran for over 1,000 years, longer than most religions have existed at all. Then one day, the records just stop. The last burials came in the age of Cleopatra's ancestors. After Rome swallowed Egypt, around 30 BC, the priests stopped coming. Sand crept over the entrance. The sphinx-lined avenue that led to the temple vanished dune by dune. And for 18 centuries, the strangest tomb in Egypt simply did not exist. No map marked it. No book remembered where it was. What brought it back was a stone head sticking out of the sand. In 1850, a young Frenchman named Auguste Mariette arrived in Egypt on an errand for the Louvre. His job was to buy old manuscripts. Wandering Saqqara, he noticed the head of a sphinx breaking the surface of a dune, and a line of ancient Greek surfaced with it in his memory. The geographer Strabo, writing in the 1st century, had described an avenue of sphinxes at Saqqara, leading to a buried temple of Serapis, sand already swallowing it in his own day. Mariette looked at the stone head and made a decision that ended his manuscript career on the spot. He hired diggers with money that was not his to spend, without permits, and followed the sphinxes. One statue became 10. 10 became more than 100, a processional avenue running under the desert, straight toward a hidden doorway in the rock. On November 12, 1851, after a year of digging, much of it done at night to keep the work hidden from the authorities, his men hammered through the final blockage. The doorway exhaled air that had been sealed in the rock for centuries. Torch in hand, Mariette became the first person in almost 2,000 years to walk the Great Gallery. In places, sand still choked the corridors nearly to the ceiling. He explored stretches of it crawling flat on his stomach, his back scraping the rock, and he recorded that the air was so thin and stale his candles kept dying in his hands. And chamber after chamber, the giant boxes emerged from the dark, lids weighing tens of tons, shoved aside at impossible angles. That day, he wrote in his journal with the flat astonishment of a man counting the impossible. "I count 24 of them, and every single one of them was empty." Think about what that means. Somebody, at some point in antiquity, came down here with enough manpower to shift 30-ton granite lids in the dark and strip every chamber. Ancient robbers hunting the gold buried with each bull, or, as some scholars suspect, religious zealots centuries later, clearing the old gods out of the earth. Nobody knows. On some of the violated boxes they left heaps of broken stone piled on the lids, something Mariette read as a deliberate gesture of contempt, an insult thrown at the dead god on the way out. And remember what they were violating. The smallest of these boxes, by Mariette's own estimate, weighed 65 tons. Whoever came before, ancient tomb robbers, later zealots clearing out the old gods, nobody knows for certain, they had taken everything. The greatest burial vault in Egypt held nothing but dust and torchlight. Decades of labor, a mountain's worth of perfect granite, guarding empty air. Mariette kept walking anyway, and in a side gallery, the old one, Kem Weset's gallery, his torch found something different. A wall. Not a doorway, a wall of plaster, intact, sealed shut, and stamped with the marks of officials who had died 3,000 years earlier. The seals dated the wall to year 30 of the reign of Ramses II. No robber had ever passed it. Mariette had the first stones lifted quietly, at night. And before his light could reach anything inside, the gap in the wall reached him first, with a smell. Resin and incense, the perfume of a funeral, still hanging in the trapped air after 3,000 years. He understood what it meant before he saw a single object. Nothing in this room had ever been disturbed. Behind that wall lay everything the rest of the Serapeum had lost. A sacred bull in its coffin, untouched. A golden pectoral. 247 Shabti figurines standing guard. Treasures connected to Kamweset himself, the prince who built the place, resting beside the god he had served. But gold was not what stopped Mariette. 5 years later, Mariette published what he had seen in that room in his own words, words you can still read today. The fingers of the Egyptian who had set the last stone of the ceiling wall were still printed in the cement, and on the layer of fine sand covering the floor, bare feet had left their marks. He called those footprints 3,700 years old. Modern chronology trims his number to about 31 centuries. It changes nothing. The last man out of that room lived while Ramses II sat on the throne. He finished his work, pressed the final plaster flat with his own hands, walked out through sand that recorded every step, and closed 3,000 years behind him. Mariette stood where you would have stood, looking down at the footsteps of a man dead for 100 generations. Two humans, face to face across the largest gap of time a footprint has ever crossed. Sit with that. The Serapeum kept giving. Along its corridors, Mariette's team recovered thousands of stone tablets left by pilgrims across 1,000 years, each one recording names, prayers, and dates. Because each stela is tied to the life of a specific bull, they form one of the most precise dating tools in all of Egyptology. An entire civilization's calendar reconstructed from get-well cards left for sacred cattle. Historians still lean on the Serapeum's archive today to date events across a dozen dynasties. We opened this story with a question: how much do you have to believe in something to carve a mountain for it in the dark? Here is the answer the Serapeum gives, and it is not the one anyone expects. The empire is gone. The god bulls are gone, stolen out of their 100-ton boxes. Even the perfection failed in the end. The very last sarcophagus never reached its chamber at all. It still sits in an access tunnel today, rough and unfinished, abandoned mid-journey when a 1,300-year-old religion simply stopped showing up for work. No fire, no collapse. One day, the ropes were just set down and no one ever came back. Yet the fingerprints survived. The footprints survived. The prince who restored other people's monuments so their names would never be forgotten was himself brought back into the light by a man doing precisely the same job, 31 centuries later. The first archaeologist in history, excavated by the father of Egyptian archaeology, because the Serapeum was never really built to preserve granite. It was built to preserve a belief. And after 3,000 years, what reached across time was not the stone's perfection. It was the human touch on it. Some of the deepest tunnels at Saqqara remain unexcavated. Ground scans keep hinting at voids no one has entered, and the desert above them keeps its face blank. Whatever waits down there has been waiting a very long time, and it can wait a little longer. So here is the question we leave you with. 3,000 years from now, when someone breaks a seal and steps into the ruins of our world, they will walk past our proudest monuments the way Mariette walked past emptied granite. Somewhere, though, they will find a fingerprint, something small and human and accidentally immortal. What do you hope yours is? Tell us below which buried place we should decode next. Subscribe, and we will meet you inside the next